We're not making sourcing decisions. We don't have relationships with the farmers. We're focused exclusively on the downstream experience,
Right.
retail experience, which is a double-edged sword. In some ways, it allows us to be hyper-focused
Mhm.
on running a coffee shop business, not a coffee business, but a coffee shop business. But the other side of the token is, and perhaps ignorance is bliss, it allows us to be ignorant to the realities faced on the ground by farmers in South America, Sub-Saharan
Mm.
Africa, and even Southeast Asia. Um, Fortunately, like you mentioned, working with Yozo, who is, and you'll hear in his podcast with you a few weeks ago, who is not just concerned about the trade and not just empathetic
Mm.
towards his suppliers, but hyper focused on ensuring that their livelihoods are protected.
If you're starting or growing your business in these volatile times in coffee and you need a little extra support, our scope of business advisory services may be just what you need. Join one of our hugely successful mastermind groups for support in a group setting, or send us an email to discuss our one-on-one consulting and business advisory services, where we'll work with you one-on-one to solve specific problems in your coffee business. All our services come with a 100% money-back guarantee, so send us an email at support@mapperforward.org and let us know how we can help you today. Welcome to the Mapper Forward Middle East podcast, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is unfortunately the final episode of a series that's just gone too fast. Like, it's been very, very fast recording this. It feels like we've been talking for 10 minutes and we've been here for almost 2 hours. This is a series with Valeria and David from Kurasu UAE. We are talking about opening a globally recognized brand here in the UAE. And the reason I wanted to have a chat, this particular chat, is because a lot of people are doing one of two things. They're either saying, oh, I'm just going to go and open in Dubai and, you know, my brand's going to do amazingly in Dubai, or they're saying, I want to bring a brand, a global brand to Dubai, and I'm going to open it. And of course, it's going to do great because it's Dubai. The global coffee industry, guys, is in a very interesting intersectional moment of our history. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the trajectory of the global coffee industry. You guys not only have your own business, but you are big thinkers and you can think on a bigger scale than just in the four walls of your store. And there's a lot of layers to the conversation that I want to have with you about this, but from your vantage point as people who are looking at building a business with multiple stores over a number of years, what is your understanding of the trajectory of our industry?
So when it comes to consumer behavior, I think one thing I can say with near conviction is our kids, we don't have kids just yet.
Inshallah.
When we do have kids, they won't drink Costa or Cafe Nero or Starbucks as we know it today. They will drink what the world knows as specialty coffee, the single origin. They will want to know from where the bean came, how it was processed, and they'd like to see it brewed in front of them, be it hand drip, or at least see the cold drip from where it came, or at least see it being manually brewed as espresso. So I think commodity coffee, as we know it, will either cease to exist or be reserved for the older generation. I think there is, especially in markets like the UAE, most of Western Europe and the States. I'm also very bullish, and this is more broadly speaking, on tea. So I've always thought that Teavana out of the US was just 30 years too early. Right. And so those that don't know about Teavana, it's Starbucks acquired them, but it was a specialty-ish tea shop where you'd have different teas of different origins, and you'd be able to have them brewed to your liking and either bring tea home or drink in store. I think as part of this fourth wave of coffee, whenever it is that we experience this fourth wave of coffee, there will also be a push towards specialty teas and seeing shops focused almost exclusively on tea begin to surface.
That's very interesting to me. What about you, Valeria? This is going to be such a great conversation. Go ahead.
I also think the specialty coffee is just getting started because there's now so many varieties of drinks and so many evolution there's nitro. People are loving nitro cold brew. There's this fascination with other types of drinks. And I think it's growing. And I think Europe has still a lot of catching up to do. I was in Italy recently and there was no specialty coffee shops. Every coffee I ordered was burned. So I still think there's a lot of room for growth. I think in Dubai, there's a very unique situation where there's lots of offering. But even when I travel to the US, there are obviously in the cities specialty coffee shops, but not as easy to get as you would think. So I think there's still a lot of room for growth. I do still think commodity coffee is going to be a thing for a while because most of my friends still drink commodity coffee. But yeah, now we're seeing also the transition of people having even single origin beans at home. And this is also a huge opportunity.
You know, what's really interesting about this conversation for me is that it highlights that the appetite for specialty coffee and signature drinks is going to increase. Where the disconnect is the access and supply. So I agree with you guys that the appetite, by the time you guys have kids, that next generation is absolutely going to want access to the kinds of coffees that you serve at Kurasu and the kinds of signature drinks.
Well, will the supply be available is the question.
But the supply will not be available.
Right.
100% the supply will not be available. And that is for many layered reasons that we talk about a lot on the Global Podcast. And a couple of those reasons are, first of all, the climate. That's why we talk so much about regenerative agriculture. The climate, coffee requires a very specific climate and environment to be able to grow. And there's a reason coffee is grown in the coffee belt, because, you know, those origins are best equipped to grow it. And we're not really sure whether as the climate shifts, it's going to shift to places that have the room to grow coffee, right? But the other reason is separate from that, very, very separate from that, is we don't have succession plans that are viable anymore. And what we mean by that, for those who don't know, who are listening, is that coffee farms are traditionally passed down and inherited. And as historically, it was a rich man's game to grow coffee. And so in places like Colombia, Valeria, you know, for generations, you would be considered a rich person if you were inheriting a coffee farm. The last couple of generations, that has not been the case. The last couple of generations, you are inheriting debt. And because you're inheriting debt, what a lot of parents started realizing is, I've got to help my kids find an exit strategy so that I don't pass on a burden to them and that they're not trapped here as well. And so they got their kids educated and they sent them to their cities to learn how to do something else. And those kids are looking at the possibility of inheriting this farm and saying, nah, once my parents are gone, I'm going to sell it to a developer. And so access, this is why supply chains mean more than they have ever meant before, given the chaos that's going on globally. Access is going to be more valuable than ever. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to see the middle of our industry completely gutted out. I think we're going to see that middle go into commercial grade. And I think we're going to see the top end of that middle go into hyper specialty, what you guys do. And I think it's going to become a luxury product. And we're starting to see the beginning effects of that now. I think it's probably going to take maybe 10 years for us to get there. But what we're seeing more than anything with the volatility is the thing that's driving this game right now. And, you know, there are people who are saying, no, you watch. Because of the volatility that's been happening, prices went up last year in 2024, right? And so what people are assuming is that coffee farmers went and planted as much coffee as they can in the ground. And that once the 3 years after that happens, the market will be flooded with coffee again. This cycle is different. If we weren't experiencing so much chaos and volatility in the industry, I would say that we're probably going to experience the same cycle. The climate's changed, and the geopolitical situation's changed, and the economics has changed. So I don't know if it's going to be the same as it's always been, but I do think that businesses are going to have to make a decision, and there'll be a lot of factors that determine whether they stay in business or not. And I guess this is where a brand like Kurasu, being a franchise with such an intentional brand, ends up paying dividends big time and gives you guys the confidence that you've got partners who understand what's going on. Am I right there?
Big time. I think we're spoiled because we, right now, as owner-operators of Kurasu UAE, we don't need to personally be involved upstream. We're not making sourcing decisions. We don't have relationships with the farmers. We're focused exclusively on the downstream experience,
right?
Retail experience, which is a double-edged sword. In some ways, it allows us to be hyper-focused on running a coffee shop business, not a coffee business, but a coffee shop business. But the other side of the token is, and perhaps ignorance is bliss, it allows us to be ignorant to the realities faced on the ground by farmers in South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and even Southeast Asia. Fortunately, like you mentioned, working with Yozo, who is, and you'll hear in his podcast with you a few weeks ago, who is not just concerned about the trade and not just empathetic towards his suppliers, but hyper-focused on ensuring that their livelihoods are protected. That, to us, instills a confidence and a comfort in focusing downstream. But who knows? Maybe we do get more so involved, more upstream in the supply chain, and try and make a difference.
Yeah. If we look at the consuming end of it then, with regards to the global industry, with regards to technology, there isn't a job that a barista does now that can't be done with technology.
Right.
How are you guys looking at the trajectory of that in your business?
Yeah, I mean, just the other day we had a demo.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Of a tech where it's automated pour overs. Right.
Yeah.
You know, a carafe is a carafe, a dripper is a dripper, a filter is a filter, but it's the barista behind the bar that will give you the pour over experience that you're seeking. And if the tech can give the same experience, well, then how can you justify the cost of having someone on your payroll, right? And
100%.
And that's a terrifying concept. We, by no means, are racing to replace staff tech. A coffee shop experience is not just having a good cup of coffee. It's, as Val mentioned earlier, it's speaking with the barista, learning about from where the coffee came, why it was processed the way it was, why it's being brewed the way it is. It's a coffee shop in many ways is a museum. You're learning about not just a brewing method, but the coffee. And ideally, you take it one step further and teach and inform about how that coffee affected the communities that produced it. And we'd love to really try and take it to the next level for our coffee shop experiences, where that is part of the process for those that seek it.
But having said that, the reality of the situation is that life is getting quicker, attention spans are getting shorter. And, you know, the as we're recording this, the series that is out on the Middle East podcast is with Reza Kossar, an Iranian barista who is now a business owner in Oman, a co-founder of Slick Coffee. And he's an international Cup of Excellence judge. He's a sensory expert. He's a roaster. He's all of these things. And we talked about this. We talked about technology. And he says, yeah, it is inevitable. Baristas will get replaced. And I also agree with that. And I take the position personally that, and this is how I'm also advising my clients, is that baristas should be freed up to get away from the mechanical work so that they can take care of the customer. And they can be focused on the customer experience, the brand experience, learning how to be more efficient with running a business, learning about supply, figuring out how to solve problems for their business. So I think it is going to be inevitable that the mechanical tasks get, and it will never be perfect, right? You know, if you've got a machine that's steaming and frothing milk, the element goes out and you have to replace it. And a machine can't replace another machine's element. Like, there's all of that. So they will never go away. But the role of barista goes away as we know it. Are you guys considering that in the business model as you grow?
At the moment, frankly, no. And maybe that's naive.
Nice. No, it's not naive. It's not naive. It says that this is not the direction you're intending on taking the business. There, as you guys were saying about Yozo's other business, 2050, it sounds like from what you were saying, that does have a bit of a focus with regards to technology. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And it's just a business strategy, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, we talked about experience, and what we'd like to think distinguishes Kurasu from other coffee shop experiences is that there is the ability, we encourage our colleagues to speak with our customers, and we encourage our customers to speak with our colleagues. And as soon as you remove that human element from the coffee shop experience, you are no longer distinguishing yourself from other coffee shops.
Yeah. So Kurasu will stay hyper specialty, right? Like, that's the whole, yeah. And folks, don't rob yourself of the opportunity. If you come to Dubai, make sure you go and visit these folks. For real. It is something to experience.
Thanks, Lee.
You're welcome, guys. And like, no financial arrangement between me and these guys, I'm telling you. Like, it was just I know I keep going on about it, but I look for places to brag about. Like, I love the fact that I can brag about every business that I am legitimately impressed by, because we need to be showcasing the businesses that I think are doing a great job, in my opinion. But other people may completely disagree with me. Good for you. But this is my show, so I get to brag as much as I want. So. Now, guys, the last question I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, David. When the future version of you comes back and watches this, what do you hope for him?
Well, that in my search for progress, I never compromised my peace.
Oh, I got chills from that. Nice. Nice. And you, Valeria, when the future version of you comes back and watches this, what do you hope for her?
I'd hope that she's proud of what she's accomplished by then.
Oh, I got chills with that one too. Hello to the future versions of both of you. I hope that we're having coffee somewhere really fabulous together. Inshallah. So guys, will you tell people where they can figure out, as we wrap up this series, where can they visit you and how can they find you online?
You can find us at Dar Wassel Mall, which is on Wassel Road, Jumeirah 2, Jumeirah 3. Be sure to follow the global Kurasu brand on Instagram, which is kurasu.kyoto. And then follow our Dubai page at Kurasu DXB, which, as we've mentioned and foreshadowed earlier on, will soon be changing to Kurasu UAE as we open in other Emirates.
Exciting. Congratulations on all your success, guys. And I'm really excited about having you back on the podcast as the brand grows across the region and watching your success and talking about having more really fantastic conversations. This has been a real treat and I appreciate your time coming on here.
Thank you so much for having us.
That was amazing.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Would you do me the honor by signing off our last episode with peace, love, and peanut butter?
We just say peace, love, and peanut butter.
Peace, love, and
have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.